The ship rumbled under her feet, its metal skeleton trembling like a living thing. Lyra kept her eyes closed, clutching the thin blanket over her body. She hadn't asked to be here. She hadn't even known what here was until they unboxed her in front of a cheering crowd. A gift, they'd said. A prank. A little joke from the ruling elites of the Draxian Empire to the simple humans. The humans had won a skirmish, a small one, but in the eyes of the Draxian aristocrats, it was enough to reward them. They gave the humans something different. A girl from the experimental breeding programs, designed for beauty, docility, and interesting genetics. Except Lyra wasn't docile. She wasn't sure what she was, but it sure as hell wasn't what they intended. The human they gave her to had looked baffled at first. Not cruel. Not eager. Just confused. His name was Commander Marek. Tall, rough around the edges, scar over his jaw like he'd seen hell and punched it back. When they'd shoved Lyra at him, he hadn't even touched her. Just stared with those steel-grey eyes, unreadable. You can take her, the Draxian envoy had sneered. Breed her if you want. Or don't. Your prize either way. The laughter of the aliens had been a cold, slimy thing sliding down Lyra's spine. Commander Marek hadn't laughed. He'd simply said, "Get out of my sight." Now, she sat in a cramped room aboard his ship, untouched, unclaimed, and utterly uncertain of her future. Her heart pounded every time she heard his heavy boots pass her door. He hadn't spoken to her since that first day. Food appeared like clockwork. Clothes, simple and practical, were left folded neatly by the door. He treated her like a person. It was the first crack in the wall around her heart. One night, she found herself wandering the dim corridors. She wasn't locked in. She never had been. Another strange thing. The humans on this ship didn't treat her like a prize. They treated her like she was dangerous, like an unexploded bomb. She rounded a corner and nearly collided with him. Commander Marek stood there, a datapad in one hand, a mug in the other. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. "Can't sleep," he said, his voice low and rough. Lyra shook her head. Her voice felt trapped. Her whole existence had been wrapped in fear for so long, she didn't know how to answer simple questions. He surprised her again. "Come on," he said, jerking his head towards the observation deck. She followed, unsure why. The deck was empty, walls of glass showing the endless stars beyond. She pressed her hands against the cool surface, drinking in the vastness. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Marek said, leaning against a railing. She nodded. "They thought they were insulting us," he said after a moment. "Handing you over like a thing. But they don't know us very well." Lyra turned to look at him. He smiled, a slow, sad thing. "We don't treat people like objects. No matter where they come from." Her throat burned. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "You're free. You always were." Something inside her cracked, and this time it wasn't just a hairline fracture. It broke wide open, a dam bursting. Tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and silent. Marek didn't move to comfort her. He just stood there, solid and steady, letting her fall apart without judgment. For the first time in her life, Lyra cried for herself. That night marked the beginning of something neither of them could name yet. The weeks that followed were strange. She became part of the ship's rhythm. Crew members warmed to her. She learned their names, their habits. She laughed, a sound she hadn't made in years. And always, Marek watched from a distance. Protecting. Waiting. One evening, he found her in the engine bay, laughing with the mechanic over a broken coolant line. "You're good with your hands," Marek said as they walked back towards her quarters. Lyra shrugged, embarrassed. "You ever think about staying?" he asked, casually, like it didn't mean everything. She stopped walking. He turned, one eyebrow raised. "I don't belong anywhere," she said, voice small. "You belong wherever you decide you do," he said simply. And that was the second crack, opening wider. One night, the ship was hit. A Draxian patrol, furious that their gift hadn't been treated as a joke. Furious that Marek's ship had been quietly investigating Draxian atrocities across the border. The attack was sudden, brutal. The walls shook. The lights flickered. Lyra huddled in the maintenance shaft, clutching a plasma cutter she'd stolen from the repair bay. She wasn't going to be a victim again. Not ever. Boot steps. Shouting. A Draxian soldier dragged Marek into view, blood staining his uniform. Lyra's heart stopped. Found your little pet too, the soldier sneered, yanking her from her hiding place. Marek's eyes met hers. Bleeding, broken, but burning with fury. Let her go, he growled. The soldier laughed and pressed a blade against Lyra's throat. Or what, human? Lyra didn't think. She moved. The plasma cutter flashed to life, slicing through the air. The Draxian screamed, dropping the knife and Marek. Marek surged up, wrenching the weapon from the alien's hands and slamming him into the wall. Lyra stood there, breathing hard, shaking, but alive. Together, they fought their way to the bridge, side by side, blood and sweat and desperation binding them tighter than any ceremony ever could. When the ship finally limped into human space, they were greeted like heroes. Lyra stood beside Marek as he reported to his superiors, head high, unflinching. Later, when they were alone, he reached out, tentative. Stay, he said. Just one word. She didn't hesitate. Always. The bond between them, forged in fire and fear, became something unbreakable. They didn't speak of love, not yet. It was bigger than love. It was survival. It was trust. It was the promise of a future neither had dared dream of. As the days turned to weeks, and the weeks to months, Lyra found herself smiling more. Laughing. Living. And then, one morning, she woke with a hand pressed against her belly, feeling a flutter deep inside. Life. New life. The prank had become a promise. The gift had become a future. She was no longer an experiment. No longer a joke. She was the mother of the next heir. And together, they would build a galaxy that would never again see anyone treated like property. Not while she and Marek still drew breath. The stars outside the window blazed brighter than she'd ever seen. And for the first time, Lyra felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Lyra sat in the dimmed medical bay, her fingers absently tracing slow circles over her belly. The soft hum of the ship vibrated through the floor, steady and comforting. Marek paced a few feet away, pretending to study the diagnostic readouts, but she knew he was watching her. Always watching her, like she might vanish if he blinked. You're making me nervous, she said, a teasing edge to her voice. He turned, guilt flashing across his features. Sorry. Just. He shook his head, scrubbing a hand over his face. I never thought I'd be this. She tilted her head, curious. A father. Alive, he said simply. The words hit her harder than she expected. How many times had they both stood on the edge of death? How many times had they thought they'd never have anything more than another battle, another loss? You're good at surviving, she said, reaching out. He crossed the distance in 2 strides and caught her hand in his. His palm was rough, calloused, but his touch was achingly gentle. Not just surviving anymore, he murmured. Lyra smiled, but a shiver danced along her spine. A warning she couldn't explain. Later that night, Marek gathered the senior crew in the war room. Holomaps hovered between them, casting blue light across grim faces. The Draxians won't let this go, he said. They consider her property. Lyra flinched. They won't forget, Marek continued, voice hard. They'll send hunters. Maybe assassins. Maybe worse. The crew shifted uneasily. So we get ahead of it, Marek said, tapping a section of the map. We hit them first. Lyra's heart thundered. Attack. Preemptively? She found her voice. Isn't that what they expect? Marek smiled grimly. No. They expect us to run. And he was right. Humanity had always played defense, always stayed just one step ahead of extinction. It was time to change the game. They launched 2 days later. The plan was reckless. Impossible. Perfect. They'd target a Draxian genetic facility, deep inside Imperial space. The same place that had designed Lyra, and thousands like her. Not just soldiers. Not just breeders. Slaves, Test subjects, tools. The facility held files, evidence, secrets that could bring the Empire to its knees if exposed. Lyra insisted on coming. "I'm not hiding," she said when Marek argued. He stared at her, jaw working. "You're carrying our child," he said finally, voice raw. "Exactly," she said. "And I won't let them win." In the end, he agreed, but only after outfitting her with enough armor and shields to survive a direct plasma hit. The insertion was clean. Too clean. They breached the outer defenses without a single alarm. Inside, the halls were sterile and silent. Too silent. Lyra moved beside Marek, pulse hammering in her ears. Every step felt wrong. Then, from the shadows, the trap snapped shut. Draxian soldiers poured from hidden panels, weapons raised. Marek roared a warning, shoving Lyra behind him as plasma fire lit the corridor. The humans fought like demons, a tight knot of fury and precision. But they were outnumbered 5-1. Lyra ducked behind a bulkhead, heart in her throat. She watched Marek move, brutal and beautiful, cutting a path through the enemy. Then she saw him. A figure moving differently from the others. Not a soldier. A handler. Carrying something small and deadly. An injector. Meant for her. She didn't think. She launched herself forward, slamming into the handler. They crashed to the ground, the injector skittering away. The handler snarled, grappling with her. His strength was inhuman. Augmented. Lyra fought like hell, every instinct screaming, every breath a battle. He drove a knee into her ribs. Pain exploded through her. She bit down a scream and clawed at his face, raking her nails across his eyes. He howled, reeling back. Marek was there a heartbeat later, wrenching the handler off her and ending him with a savage blow. He dropped to his knees beside her. "Lyra," he gasped, hands trembling as he checked her. "I'm fine," she lied, even as black spots danced in her vision. He pressed his forehead to hers for a second, a desperate, grounding touch. "Never do that again," he whispered. She managed a breathless laugh. No promises. They fought their way to the central archive, hacking into the databanks. Streams of information flooded their systems, proof of the Empire's crimes. As they extracted the files, alarms finally blared. Backup was coming. "Time to go," their pilot, Kez, shouted over comms. They ran, Lyra leaning heavily on Marek but refusing to slow him down. Explosions rocked the facility as they made it back to the extraction point. The ship roared to life, lifting them into the blackness of space just as enemy reinforcements descended. Lyra slumped in her seat, breathing hard. Marek crouched in front of her, scanning her face. "We're good," she said, forcing a smile. "You're stubborn as hell," he muttered, but there was no anger in it. Only fierce, aching love. They made it back to human territory, battered but victorious. The data they carried was more valuable than anyone had dared hope. Exposing the Draxian atrocities rallied dozens of neutral worlds to humanity's side. The balance of power shifted overnight. The Empire staggered, stunned and furious. But Lyra had little time to celebrate. Her injuries from the fight were worse than she'd admitted. Internal bruising. Stress on the pregnancy. Marek sat by her bedside in the med bay, face hollow with worry. "Don't you dare," she said weakly. He blinked. "Dare what?" "Give up on me." His hand found hers, gripping tight. "Never," he said, voice breaking. She fought. For him. For their child. For the future they hadn't even dared dream of. Days blurred into each other. Pain. Fear. Hope. And finally, the healer smiled. "You're going to be fine." Marek sagged in his chair, head dropping into his hands. Lyra let herself cry, for the first time since the battle. Not tears of fear. Tears of life. Weeks later, she stood on the observation deck again, Marek beside her, their hands intertwined. The stars stretched out before them, infinite and shining. "We did it," she whispered. He kissed her forehead. "No. You did it." She smiled, resting her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. They had survived. But the war was not over. Not yet. Not while the Empire still drew breath. And Lyra, once a prank, once a joke, would make damn sure the galaxy never forgot what she had become. Not a tool. Not a prize. A force. A mother. A reckoning. And this was just the beginning. The days that followed were thick with tension. Lyra could feel it in the air, heavy and waiting, like the moment before a lightning strike. The Draxians weren't just furious, they were terrified. Humanity had proven it could strike back, not just with guns, but with truth. And truth was harder to kill. Marek called a meeting in the main hall. Every crew member, every ally they'd gathered, packed into the tight space. Faces lined with exhaustion, hope, and fear. They will retaliate, Marek said, voice cutting through the low murmur. Harder than before. No one flinched. They knew. We can't stay hidden. Not anymore. They know who we are, what we carry. He gestured to the screen behind him. It flickered to life, showing a map of known Draxian strongholds. We strike, he said. Not with brute force. With precision. With strategy. The crew leaned in, drawn by the fire in his voice. We cut out their heart. The plan was audacious. Insane, even. Target the Draxian High Council itself. Lyra sat in the back, heart hammering. Part of her wanted to scream, to beg him to stop. To hide. To protect the fragile life inside her. But another part of her, the part forged in fire, understood. This was the only way. The journey to Draxian Prime was brutal. They slipped through enemy lines, dancing along the edges of detection. Every alarm, every flicker of a sensor made Lyra's stomach twist into knots. Marek never left her side. At night, he held her, one hand always resting on her stomach, as if anchoring them both to life. We're going to make it, he whispered into her hair. She believed him. She had to. They arrived in orbit under cover of an ion storm, the perfect chaos to hide their approach. The infiltration team was small. Marek. Lyra. Kez. Two of the best operatives humanity had left. The plan was simple: breach the council chambers, upload a virus into the central systems, and broadcast the council's darkest secrets to the galaxy. Simple. Deadly. They moved through the twisting corridors of the Capitol building, shadows among shadows. Lyra felt every heartbeat, every breath, as if the walls themselves were alive and listening. They reached the council doors. Marek keyed in the override codes they had stolen months ago. The door hissed open. And they walked into a trap. The council chamber was empty. Silent. A soft click echoed behind them. Lyra spun around just in time to see the doors slam shut. Force fields shimmered to life. From hidden panels in the floor, figures emerged. Draxian elites, armored and armed. The leader stepped forward, a cruel smile twisting his face. "Did you really think we wouldn't see this coming?" he sneered. Marek moved in front of Lyra instinctively. The Draxian leader chuckled. "Ah, the pet human and his little broodmare. How touching." Lyra's fists clenched. "You should have stayed hidden," the Draxian said. "Now you'll serve a better purpose." He nodded to his soldiers. They surged forward. The fight was chaos. Plasma bolts ripped through the air. Marek and Kez fought like men possessed, every move precise and deadly. Lyra stayed low, using the skills Marek had drilled into her. She wasn't helpless anymore. But they were outnumbered. Outgunned. Pinned against the council dais, Marek shielded her with his body. "There's too many," Kez shouted over the din. Marek's jaw tightened. His mind raced, calculating odds, looking for a crack. Then Lyra saw it. The central energy core that powered the security systems. "There," she cried, pointing. Kez didn't hesitate. He hurled a plasma grenade toward the core. The explosion rocked the chamber. The force fields sputtered and died. The council members, hidden in their panic rooms, had underestimated human ingenuity. "Move!" Marek bellowed. They fought their way out, step by bloody step. Outside, chaos reigned. The explosion had triggered emergency protocols. Automated defenses fired blindly. Civilians fled in terror. Marek dragged Lyra into the shadow of a toppled transport. "Can you run?" he panted. She nodded, though every muscle screamed. They bolted through the shattered streets, dodging debris and enemy fire. Ahead, their extraction ship hovered, ramp down, Kez already firing from the doorway. "Come on," he yelled. They sprinted the final yards. A shot rang out. Lyra stumbled. Marek caught her, hauling her up, eyes wild. "I'm fine," she gasped. "Keep moving." They collapsed onto the ramp as it lifted off, the city shrinking beneath them. Kez piloted them hard and fast out of the atmosphere, engines screaming. In orbit, a human fleet awaited. Reinforcements. Lyra slumped against Marek, clutching her side. Blood seeped through her fingers, but it was shallow. A graze. "You scared the hell out of me," he muttered, holding her close. She smiled weakly. "You're getting used to it." The virus uploaded successfully. Across the Empire, screens lit up with images of Draxian horrors. Torture. Slavery. Genocide. The galaxy recoiled in collective disgust. Worlds that had stayed neutral out of fear now turned against the Empire. Uprisings erupted. Trade routes collapsed. Alliances shattered. The Draxian Empire bled from 1,000 cuts. And Marek and Lyra watched it all unfold from the safety of human space, battered but unbroken. Lyra recovered slowly. Her pregnancy, miraculously, remained stable. Marek barely left her side. One evening, as the sun set over the garden domes of the refugee colony, Marek took her hand. "Marry me," he said. She laughed, a sound full of life. Now, he said fiercely. "Before the next battle. Before the next crisis. Before anything else can take it from us." She kissed him, long and slow. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. They married under the stars, a simple ceremony witnessed by the crew who had become their family. No crowns. No thrones. Just promises made in blood and hope. Later that night, lying tangled together in the quiet, Marek pressed his forehead to hers. "Whatever comes," he said, "we face it together." And Lyra believed him. Because this wasn't just survival anymore. It was love. It was rebellion. It was the beginning of something the galaxy had never seen before. And Lyra, once a prank, once a weapon, once a gift, was ready to lead it. The seasons shifted in the refugee colony, the gardens blooming brighter with every passing week. Lyra walked slowly under the great glass canopy, her hand resting on the swell of her stomach, the life inside her nearing its arrival. Children ran between the trees, their laughter like music. Humans, Draxian defectors, hybrids all free now, all living side by side. Something no one had thought possible just months ago. Marek walked beside her, his steps matching hers instinctively. His arm brushed hers lightly, steady, always there. Peace. It was still fragile. The Draxian Empire hadn't fallen completely, not yet. But it had cracked. And in the spaces between the fractures, new alliances were growing. Today was a council meeting. Not of empires, not of conquerors. Of survivors. Lyra stood before them, heart pounding, as dozens of leaders, soldiers, refugees, and dreamers looked to her for guidance. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't wanted it. But fate had a way of choosing the unwilling, the broken, the stubborn. "We are not here because we were the strongest," Lyra said, her voice carrying over the assembly. "We are here because we chose to hope." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The Draxians tried to break us. To divide us. To use us. She touched her belly lightly. They failed. Marek stood behind her, silent but unyielding. Her anchor. "We will not rebuild the old ways," Lyra continued. "We will not replace one tyrant with another. We will create something new. Together." Cheers erupted, raw and real. Afterward, Marek found her on the edge of the garden, staring out at the stars. "You were brilliant," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She leaned into him, closing her eyes. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Good," he said with a chuckle. "Means you'll do it right." She laughed softly, the sound blending with the night breeze. A sharp pain rippled through her then, sudden and undeniable. Marek tensed. "Lyra," she gasped, clutching his arm. "It's time." Panic flickered across his face, quickly replaced by determination. He scooped her into his arms, moving faster than she thought possible. The medics were ready. They had been for weeks. Hours blurred into moments. Pain. Struggle. Hope. And then, a cry. Small. Fierce. Lyra wept as they placed the tiny, perfect creature against her chest. A daughter, dark-haired and bright-eyed, a symbol of everything they had fought for. Marek knelt beside them, his fingers trembling as he touched his daughter's hand. "She's so small," he whispered, awe in his voice. "She'll grow," Lyra said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "She'll change the stars." The crew visited, each one leaving a small gift. A carved pendant. A tiny knitted cap. A scrap of cloth from the flag of the first rebel world to rise. Symbols. Promises. The galaxy was watching. Waiting. Lyra named her daughter Aria. A new song. A new hope. Weeks later, as Lyra cradled Aria under the stars, Marek sat beside her, their shoulders touching. "We did it," he said quietly. Lyra looked at the sleeping baby, the peaceful colony, the bright fields where once there had only been ashes. "We did more than survive," she said. "We built something worth surviving for." Marek smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. Lyra pressed her forehead to his. They didn't need grand speeches. Or monuments. They had each other. They had the future. The Draxians had tried to give humanity a joke, a burden, a living insult. Instead, they had given them a revolution. And in the end, the moral was clear. It is not the strength of your enemies that defines you. It is the strength of your heart. Lyra, once a prank, once a prize, now a leader and a mother, smiled up at the stars. They had tried to break her. They had only made her stronger. And the galaxy would never be the same again.